Hello, everybody. My name is Skylar McKay, and I want to cover Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. So, out of a lot of the books I've read that cover, certain negotiation techniques, this is definitely probably my number one. I mean, just some of the techniques Chris covers and how detailed he is on how they work and gives real examples. I mean, I absorb this better than, a lot of other books that just give you a lot of technical jargon. So Never Split the Difference is written by Chris Voss. Chris Voss, what an incredible guy. I mean, just listen to this. He was a former FBI hostage negotiator. He was one of the top FBI hostage negotiators. And he wrote this book to cover techniques that the FBI uses during hostage negotiation situations. I mean, just think about that. Think about how insane that is. Um, the FBI is using these techniques to talk people out of doing really bad things. Kidnappings, someone holding up a bank, for example. But I mean, you get the point there. And I wanted to do this first video to give you a high level overview of some of the most critical techniques that I think that he leverages and he discusses in his book. One is mirroring. Okay. You may be familiar with it, and I was familiar with, but I didn't really truly understand how it worked. So mirroring is when you repeat the last three words someone says back to them. But it is really important that you use voice inflection. So again, this first video is just to give you an overview of what I'm going to be discussing, and I'm going to break out my next videos and cover in more detail each one of these topics. But I just wanted to give you guys a rundown of what to expect. And I think you'll find this stuff really, really interesting. And hopefully this resonates with you and makes you a more skilled negotiator. So again, marrying the example would be someone saying, wow, that is just really expensive. And then what you would say back to them is really expensive. But you see how like it is really important. You can't just marry someone back and just repeat what they said back to them without using the voice inflection. It just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound organic. So I know a lot of people will probably laugh at this, but this is a critical technique. I mean, you can use marrying to get someone to explain a little bit more about what they're thinking there behind the lines, so the emotion behind the curtain, as far as why they think that it's too expensive, right? A lot of it is like pre notions that they might be thinking about. The second piece is labeling. I think labeling is extremely powerful. It's actually probably the number one technique I think I pulled from this book that I incorporated in my sales skills. Labeling is when you basically name the emotion that the other party's feeling. So an example would be, it sounds like you've been burned before, or it seems like reliability matters more than price here. Um, you can also mislabel. So Chris talks about mislabeling, which is really fascinating. So basically, you mislabel their emotions behind it. So, for example, it could be this, right? Let me think for a second. It sounds like you value price more than you value results. You see what I mean? So that would be someone giving you like a price rejection. So you want to mislabel their emotions behind it to get them to open up and talk about it a little bit more, right? Because what you're trying to do with labeling and marrying is you're trying to uncover new data, which is going to increase your odds of, closing the deal, right? The third point is calibrated questions. So calibrated questions is another huge topic. I mean, all of these are great, but calibrated questions is basically like it's open-ended questions that you can leverage to steer the conversation in the direction that you ideally want the conversation to go in, right? So these are questions that usually start with what, how, and sometimes why. So I'm gonna, and there's a list of examples that I'm going to go over in my next videos. But again, this is just to give you a high level overview of what to expect and some of the techniques that were covered in this book. Um, the fourth point is anchoring. Well, Chris Voss talks about extreme anchoring. So anchoring is a technique that a lot of the elites in negotiation use, and you have to be extremely careful on how you use it because if you use it wrong or you don't use it the correct way, you can just it'll just ruin the whole process for you. So an example of anchoring could be setting the reference point early. An example would be instead of saying this costs $15,000, what you would say is projects with this scope usually range between 14 and $18,000. So you're giving it a range. So you're placing the anchor as far as what they expect. So they immediately think in the higher end of the scale, right? So oh, this is going to cost $18,000. So that way you can come in at $15,000 in the end, and it doesn't look like a good price, right? Does that make sense? So, and I'll go over this. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to go over it in more detail anyways in my next videos. The fifth point is the voice inflection. So Chris Voss talks about the late night FM DJ voice. It's his way of basically saying, slow down, talk with you know, talk smooth. Maybe I might not be sounding very smooth right now, but you get the point, and I'll cover it in my next videos as well. And then he is huge on identifying black swans. So Chris Voss actually has a consulting group called the Black Swan, and he talks about black swans. There's basically the last quarter of the book is him really addressing black swans, how to uncover them. Basically, it's critical information that you can uncover in the consulting process that will help you close a deal. So it's like finding out, for example, I do some marketing consulting, right? So a black swan would be talking to a business owner and then saying, I just hired 5 people on my crew. If I don't keep these guys busy, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to a competitor. That is a black swan right there. You can leverage that. That's a motive, right? So it's a buying motive. Um, and if you go to some of my other videos, I do talk about buying motive as well, and I will cover that in more detail in some of my next videos. So stay tuned, and I hope this helps kind of give you like a high level overview of what to expect with some of these next videos. Thanks.